Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to our Newsmaker Lunch for today. This is an ongoing series sponsored by the American Spectator magazine and Americans for Tax Reform. I'm Jim Antle from the American Spectator, and we're here today to discuss a new book by Grover Norquist, Public Enemy #1 of Taxation in America, and the economist John Lott. Over the next few months, we're going to be hearing a lot of positive statistics from the president about how he's turning the economy around, and he deserves a second term on the basis of progress towards reducing unemployment and making all kinds of the economic situation better, moving us away from the Great Recession. The book that we're discussing today, however, paints a much different picture of the president's economic policies, and I think it's summed up very well by the book's title, Debacle. And I don't think a lot of their portrayal of what the president's record is going to be on jobs, economic growth, the extent of regulation and spending and deficit spending perpetuated by this administration is going to be very different from what I think you'll be hearing on the campaign trail from the incumbent president. So to sort of kick it off, we'll have Grover start with his talk about what they were trying to do when they wrote this book and their vision for the economy under Obama.
Sure. Debacle has about three parts to it. The first is people are more familiar with. The failure of Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, the government mandate that banks make bad loans for houses and how that led to the financial crisis. And then part one. And then the question of how the Obama administration and the latter part of the Bush administration reacted to that with bailouts and the stimulus spending. 4 different stimulus packages, not just the big one we generally think of, and why that actually made the recession worse and the recovery weaker and creating fewer jobs, increasing GDP less than other countries, which didn't do stimulus spending, and that our recovery is weaker than previous recoveries, because you could compare what we're going through now with the Reagan recovery, with the Ford recovery, with recoveries back to the Great Depression, or you can compare it with other countries that are going through what we've been going through in the last several years. And in both cases, the Obama recovery is weaker, less strong, and in some cases bizarrely weaker than what has happened in the past. Why? Well, unlike Reagan, who got a deeper recession in terms of destruction of jobs, 10.8%, unemployment's of 10.1%, and Reagan had to wrestle double-digit inflation at the same time. What Obama did was not reduce marginal tax rates and reduce spending from where it was going and deregulate. He did the opposite of each of these things. And particularly on the stimulus package, you have to ask yourself, now, what was the theory? The theory was that if the government were to take $1 from somebody who earned it, either in taxes, you go physically take it, or in debt, you borrow it, and then you hand that dollar to somebody who's politically connected, that there are now more dollars in the economy, that there are more jobs in the economy. The idea being that if Reid and Pelosi and Obama went to one side of a lake and each had a bucket and dipped it into the lake, and they took their 3 buckets of water around to the other side of the lake and in front of the MSNBC cameras poured the 3 buckets back into the lake, that you would have stimulated the lake to great depths. This is actually the theory they were operating on. Now, not only is there at best, the same amount of water in the lake, minus whatever somebody in Chicago takes home with them, but at the same time, what incentives does this give to the person who worked on Saturday, whose dollar you took for this experiment? Do they keep working? Do they hide their resources? And what incentive does it give to the person who, because they were politically connected or did what the government wanted, instead of working, they got the dollar because? It gives bad incentives both to the people who receive the cash, and it gives disincentives to work, saving, and investment to the people who were actually earning the dollars in the first place. So it shouldn't surprise us that this didn't help the recovery, didn't create jobs, didn't create more money in the economy simply by moving it from one person's bank account to somebody else's hand, and yet it does seem to have surprised the Obama administration, which continually predicted that now the economy is going to turn around because we spent all this money. And every time it didn't, they've had to have a new explanation as to why it didn't work, usually blaming somebody many years ago. So then the third part of the book is, okay, so now that we're in this mess, we've got a weak recovery, job creation is weak compared to the Reagan recovery, GDP growth is weak compared to the Reagan recovery, very weak. Now what do we do? And that's where we have a 12-step plan towards recovery. And the short of it is, make a list of all the things that Obama, Reid, and Pelosi did and stop doing them and do the opposite. But it's a little bit, when somebody says, okay, reduce tax rates, spend less, regulate less, don't inflate the currency, it's not particularly helpful as political advice. It's a little like when somebody says, how do I get from Pakistan to China? And you say, oh, just go over the Himalayas. Okay, how do we cut taxes and reduce spending and deregulate? And there in the last chapter of the book, we go through what it's going to take, because we have a decade ahead of us where the Republicans have a majority of the House and should keep it because of redistricting. They got 25 net seats in the House, or should have a Republican House for the decade. If you look at the Senate seats, there are 47 Republicans, and you're going to need to net 4 to get a majority, but you need to net 16 to get 60, which, as Obama taught us, what you really need if you're going to make dramatic change in Congress. In the next election cycle, in 2012, there are 23 Democrat seats up in the Senate, 10 Republican, and 2 years later, 20 Democratic seats and 13 Republican. So in the next 3 years, the next 2 election cycles, 43 Democratic Senate seats up, 23 Republican Senate seats up. Of the Republican Senate seats, you worry about 2 of them. Of the Democratic Senate seats, they have to worry about 20 of them. The Republicans need to net 13 of those to get to 60 in the next 2 election cycles. Then the question of the presidency is there, but if you elect a Republican president to go with a Republican House and Senate in 12 or in 14, then you have the opportunity to begin to turn around some of these decisions. And I think that the Paul Ryan of Wisconsin's roadmap is aptly named. It is the map, the path to a future that works for America. It is a U-turn on the road to serfdom. It's not slowing down the disaster. It's not reducing the pain. It actually does turn us around and puts us in a dramatically different direction where we're actually going to end up with less spending as a percentage of GDP and stronger economic growth, not just for the next 4 or 10 years, but for the next 50 and 75 years. So the book is a little depressing at the beginning. Stick with it. It's annoying at the beginning as you see Obama and Reid and Pelosi make mistake after mistake after mistake and double down on their errors. But then it gets cheerful when we walk through how we can actually, not just theoretically how you could turn the economy around, but politically, what are the steps to electing a House, a Senate, and a president, and keeping them on a path to reduce spending, reduce taxes, and get the economy moving as it ought to be.
Thanks, Grover. John?
Thanks very much. I appreciate you having us here. Well, we wanted to, the original motivation for the book, I'm getting some feedback here, was there are lots of people who have said Obama promised certain things in terms of the economy. It's a little bit hard. Can I have your?
Yeah, see if mine works better.
Yeah, sorry about that. Turn off the mic. All right, yeah. You get the good one, I guess. So anyway, thanks very much. So obviously, a lot of Republicans are saying, well, Obama promised 8% unemployment if we pass the stimulus. Went up to over 10%. We just can't go and tell people, look, he made a certain promise and it didn't work out. You have to somehow explain to people why the stimulus made things worse. And there's pretty simple, strong economic arguments for why that's the case. When you have the stimulus, $825 billion, and the other 4 jobs programs that Grover was talking about, not only are you moving $1 trillion from where you and I or companies would have spent it to where the government wants it spent, not only are you moving resources from one company to another or from one industry to another, but you're moving around the jobs that are associated with that money. And the problem is that jobs don't instantly move from one